Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm Wendy Haney. Today we're going to talk about the disappearing 4-patch. Yep, I had several videos on the disappearing 9-patch and the double disappearing 9-patch. Now we're going to deal with the 4-patch. And you're going, okay, well, that couldn't be too bad. You're only dealing with 4-patch, right? Yes. So there we have it. This is a disappearing 4-patch. We start with a 4-patch block and then we cut it up and twist it around and put it back together to end up with this. Here's the deal though on this one. Going to give you a little bit of additional information because this block has lots of seams and a lot of little seams, and you're cutting things apart and putting them back together. So it is very critical that in this case that you have your 1/4 inch seam accurate, because if you don't, you're not going to end up with the finished block size that you're intended to. I am working with a 5-inch block for my 4-patch, and once we cut it all apart like this, we're going to end up with an 8.5-inch square. Yay! 8-inch blocks are fabulous, right? But when I did my first one, it's not quite 8.5 inches. Yes, so I'm like, and I'm not talking a little bit off. It was like, what the heck? I thought I had a pretty good 1/4 inch seam, but I don't know. So I did my next block and we're pretty close, but I made a change. Here is what I did. Normally, I'm used to working with my 1/4 inch foot. I'm gonna take a picture. Don't know if it's good. No, it's not gonna focus on it. Nice try. Kevin will put up a photo. There, somewhere. The 1/4 inch foot I really like, and I use it a lot of times. What I discovered recently, though, in reading some other material, is that sometimes people have a problem with this one, is because you don't have as much, excuse me, your foot isn't all the way across where your feed dogs are. So it's partially over your feed dog. So it has a tendency sometimes for me to get, my seams get a little, I have to work really, really hard to keep them straight. Okay, so I remembered years ago, my mentor, Elaine Nyquist, suggested, don't use the 1/4 inch foot. Use one of these bigger feet. I've got an N foot and a J foot for my baby lock that have a bigger presence over your feed dog. That way, it's feeding all of it and you're not having this fabric that's like partially over your feed dog. The key thing with that is that the edge of these feet are not a 1/4 inch. So it's not like you can just put your fabric on and sew along with your edge and have a 1/4 inch. No, that doesn't work. Same with this one. This one's a little narrower than that one, but you're still gonna have the same problem. So what you need to do is, if you switch to one of these feet, is you need to move the position of your needle. Yep, get out that trusty manual for your sewing machine and discover how to shift the needle to the right so that you get a 1/4 inch seam. So what I did, and the other very, very, very critical thing, if you're doing that, is that a lot of times quilters will say, use your plate that has a single hole in the middle. You're less likely to get stuff stuck in there. Well, if you're shifting the position of your needle to use one of these sewing machine feet, then you need to make sure you're using your foot plate that has the wide opening, because otherwise you're going to be very, very unhappy when you take a stitch and your needle is over here and hits the plate instead of the hole. So remember that. So switch to the plate with the wider hole for your needle since you're going to shift it. And then what I did was I got out a piece of fabric. Make sure you've got a straight edge, and then come over here and get your marking pen out and draw a 1/4 inch. And sometimes, if you'll notice here, I had to do this multiple times on this one and get it so you get this under your foot, get your needle adjusted. So see how it works. And I would suggest that your needle be on the inside. Remember, your marking pen has a weight, your thread has a weight, and when you fold the seam it does. So I would get your needle just on the inside of that line towards the outside. That will help you get a much better 1/4 inch seam, which will make this block go so much better so that you end up with an 8.5 inch block when you're done. So let's get started. For my disappearing 4 patch, as you can see, I went with just 2 colors. This makes it very simple. Now, you can definitely go with multiple colors and go really, really scrappy, but this is a really easy way to get started because it's easier for you to see what I'm doing also. So for 1 block, you need 2 of a, generally I recommend 2 of a dark, 2 of a light. So, or you can go with, whatever that works for you that is kind of contrasting colors. You need 2 of each for your 4 patch. Pretty simple, huh? And then we're gonna just lay them out to make your 4 patch so your corners, your colors are opposite of each other. Very, very simple. I'm gonna put that over there. I'm gonna put that over there. I'm gonna go sew my 1/4 inch. We're gonna open them up. And in this case, I usually press both to the dark. And then we're gonna come back and we're gonna sew those together. Pretty common there to make your 4 patch. So I will go do that and get my 4 patch ready because I think you can handle getting that 4 patch done without me walking you through all of the steps. I am making 1 block, so I kind of went to my stash and found enough fabric that I went, oh, I think I have enough that I can get, I had enough for 4 lights and 4 darks. If you're doing this to make a quilt or something larger, I would suggest you buy yardage and then go ahead and strip cut. So cut a bunch of strips of your light that are 5 inches wide, your dark that's 5 inches wide, and then subcut those into 5 inch. Or to make it really easy, you could get 2 strips of fabric. So let's just pretend these are larger than my squares. Let's pretend these are long strips of fabric. In that case, sew your 2 strips together. Sew your whole strip of fabric together, your full width of fabric. And then before you press them open, subcut them into 5 inch squares. So then it'll look like this. It'll be sewn 1/4 inch for a whole strip of fabric, and then cut your 5 inch, and then bingo. You have a lot of pairs of your light and your dark. And if you have a lot of those, guess what? So in this case, you'd have 2 of them. So all you have to do is flip one of them around and put it on the other side and pair them up like that to get your 4 patch. That makes making a lot of these at one time very, very quick. Strip piecing, it's the way to go. I forgot to mention when I was talking about the 1/4 inch seams, I opted to use the J foot. I felt it gave me a wider foot on top of my fabric and the feet. Reminder, I'm supposed to do something. Anyway, so I chose to use the J foot. And after a number of adjustments, I thought I could go with I think I did a 5 and I did a 5.25. Anyway, I am at a 5.5 shift of my needle to the right. And it's looking really good. Here is my 4-patch finished. This would be a good time to check your 1/4 inch seam, because if this block is not a 9.5 inch square, you're setting yourself up for problems. Well, it'll still work, but your size isn't going to be accurate once we start cutting things apart and putting them back together. So this is a good point to check your 1/4 inch seam. So I am going to do a double check here. And yep. Oh, maybe a thread or so up there, but I have a good solid 9.5 inch block, so we are good to go. And I apologize for the cough. We're still getting rid of it. Now we have this. If you have a rotating cutting mat, now's the perfect time to get it out, because we're going to be slicing and dicing. When I pressed these, when I put these together, I pressed them to the dark. Then once my 4-patch was together, I just chose a side and pressed them. In this case, so many times you've heard me talk about doing a pinwheel seam in the middle. I did not. After doing my last one, I kind of figured out, actually, okay, doing my last 2, first one I pinwheeled it. The second one I felt came out better with some matching seams if I did not pinwheel the middle. So press to a side, call it good. Now what we're going to do is we are going to cut this 1 inch off center all ways. So 1 inch from the center here, 1 inch from the center there, 1 inch here, and 1 inch here. Basically, we're going to end up with a 2-inch strip of fabrics and this wonderful little 4-patch in the middle. This can be tricky because you don't want to move your fabric. But if you do, well, we'll see how I do. I find with this block, instead of using my super long ruler that I use for strip piecing and trimming up my full lengths of fabric, I have a 6-inch by 12-inch ruler here from Omnigrid. And I love it because it's really good for this, because it doesn't get in the way because it's too big. So what I do is I line up everything, but for real. I am 1 inch off my center. Hold firmly, cut firmly but gently, if that's available. Now, you want to be very careful when taking your ruler off. And then you're going to rotate your mat. And I just rotated it 1 turn. I'm actually doing this a little bit different this time. Usually I've cut that one, then I've cut that one, and then I've come back and cut the other one. But I really don't see any reason. So if I cut this way, yes, there is. The reason why you don't want to now cut it here is because, no, we're going to do it. I think we're good. So now, once again, I line everything up. And cut another 1 inch away from center. Being very careful again. turn it to my left again. Put my ruler down there very carefully so as not to nudge anything. And I'm actually kind of squaring it up all the way around, which is another reason why, if you make sure your starting square is 9.5, you have multiple points to keep things straight when you cut it. Okay, another cut. Very carefully. And one more turn. Get my ruler down there nice and gently for the final cut. And you know what? Cutting it this way, where I am literally turning my mat a quarter of a turn and going 1 inch off center, actually allowed me to do my cut much more accurately, and I had less movement of my fabric. When I did my other 2 blocks, I cut 1 inch off center. I rotated it all the way around, cut 1 inch off center, tilted it. I had shifting with my fabric both times I did it that way, but that's kind of what you'll see online. That's where you cut it. And I'm like, well, why can't I just cut it as I go around? That kept my fabric more stable, in my opinion. Either way, see what works for you. Key thing is you're cutting 1 inch off center. Now that we have our block cut to pieces, you're going to twist this little 4 patch in the middle. You're going to switch your dark with your light on both sides. And now we're going to put it back together. It will make complete sense, because if you'll notice, there is never a spot where a dark is next to a dark. So if you ever saw this, you'd be going, ooh, something's wrong. That's not what it's supposed to look like. You always have dark, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark. It's all laid out. I like to work in, it really doesn't matter whether you work in a column or a row. In this case, I'm going to work in my rows. So I'm going to do that. Those are super easy because I don't have any seams to match. But my little pinwheel in the middle, let's see. Oh, so sad. My seams don't match. They're not nested. No big deal. I leave my 4 patch in the middle the way it is as far as my seams are pressed, but I will touch this other piece and change it. So I'm going to press my seams the opposite direction so that when I put it back together, my seams can be nested. That's kind of important. It will help you get a nice cleaner matching seams in the middle. I'm going to go and do my I guess columns, rows. Anyway, getting my first 3 columns done, whichever you want to call it. And then we'll come back and add the other ones. I have the first 2 pieces of my rows, columns. Oh boy, columns and rows, I'm struggling today. It's been a long week. And what I've discovered is that here in the middle, you want to press to the bottom. You don't want to press up where you've got a lot more seams. So you always want to press this middle column to the bottom on that seam, which means your seam here and here, you're pressing into the middle. And it's going to be the same here. So when we put, see, look what I did. I laid this out. And now I should have, as soon as I looked at this one, I went, oh, you've got the wrong sides. This goes over there and that goes over there, because I never should be putting a blue on top of a blue. A big signal of, oops, don't do that. So I'm put this here and sew my 1/4 inch, this here and sew my 1/4 inch. Now, what's the chance my seams are gonna nest here? Woohoo! So one of those will nest without you flipping the seam around after you pressed it. The other one, you'll have to redo it like I did on this one. I'm gonna go sew a 1/4 inch, get that nice and nested, and that one. One thing, as I nest seams, as I do that, I will nest it at the top. I will get the top nice and nested, but I will also look at the bottom and kind of make sure that seam is nested and even all the way down. That helps make sure I've got this whole strip. And if you look there, it's like, ooh, maybe I'm a little kittywampus, but that keeps things more accurate, I believe. Especially when you're doing this little 4 patch here. Gonna go put those together, and we're getting close. I now have my 3 columns that I did. Light, dark, light, dark. Dark, light, dark, light. Yay! I laid them out correctly this time. As I mentioned, I pressed these seams to the outside. So these are pressed to the inside. They're nice and ready, which means we can now flip this. And I prefer to stitch with the 4 patch up because it has more, I suppose they all have the same seams. It's just a preference. So that's what I do. And so we want to make sure in this one, we've got 3 seams we need to match. And in this case, because of the way we did it, they should all be nested very nicely. So we're going to get that middle one. I always start with my middle one, making sure I'm nested at the top and, as I said, on the bottom, and then I work outward with that and get that next nested seam and the next one, and then my corners. You do that and then come back, and I would at that time not press it, and then come back, and then you're going to have this out and you're going to put the other column on here, and then you have your 4 patch. And I'll show you how I pressed at the final pressing when everything was sewn together. I have my block done. Well, except for the final pressing. Looks pretty good. Yep. What I've discovered, now is the time that I find pinwheeling works. Instead of doing it in the center, I do it at the very end for these 4 corners. Oh, also, when I put, I don't know which end I did last, this last one in, I needed to reverse the direction I had this seam pressed originally. Yes, that would have been it, because normally this would have been pressed to the dark. So in order to match it up and nest it with this seam, I needed to repress it the opposite direction. Pay attention to that. No big deal to repress a seam to get them nested. They will match so much better if you're able to nest your seams. Then what I do is I go through and I take these corners and finger press and get my pinwheels. You just twist that seam a tad. Yep, just kind of twist it, and it unhooks that one little seam, and finger press, and there we go. And then, let's see, what did we do? So so everything ends up pressing to the larger block, so I can more accurately finger press here. Get rid of all my little threads all over the place. Come on. And there's our disappearing four patch. Okay, this is the time to see how accurate I am. As I mentioned, the last two that I made were not as accurate as they needed to be. I didn't have a full 8.5 inch block. The first one was short quite a bit. I'm like, what the heck? So here's my 8.5 inch ruler. Put that on top of there. I'm so much very happy with this one. I have this one little corner here that something's maybe out of whack and needs to be tugged down a little bit, but yeah. Yes, I'm very pleased with that. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the adjustment I made was I made the first block, the brown and cream one, and went, what the heck? And that one I'd used my 1/4 inch foot on. Then I remembered Elaine's recommendation, so I went out and got my J-foot out, and I dug out my manual as to how to adjust my needle on my Solaris 2. Initially, I adjusted it. I thought I had it good based on my my little strip of fabric that I was sewing on and writing on. It's like, yeah, I'm on the line. It's 1/4 inch. And that was, I'm pretty sure, either 5 or 5.25. Apologize, can't remember which. But in that case, it was right on the line. What I discovered is I really need to be just inside of my marking lines. So a 5.5 adjustment to the right with my needle using my J-foot is giving me a very, very accurate block. I am tickled with this, and I think my J-foot is going to stay on my machine, and I'm not going to go back to my 1/4 inch foot, which I used to think that was the bomb and that was the way to do it. So biggest thing when you do this, put a sticky on your machine so that when you go there, if your machine isn't one that will lock that needle in place so that when you turn your machine back on, it's all set, it's where you want it, you're going to be very, very unhappy if you do that. You come back to your machine to stitch something else, and you stitch a few things and you realize, oh no, I'm not stitching 1/4 inch. Been there, done that. Stickies are amazing things. Adjust needle position. Keep that in mind. There we go. There is our disappearing 4-patch. I will put a link. You can see how to do a disappearing 9-patch if you'd like. And also, go out and Google the, sorry, we're gonna have a problem with one of my cameras. The camera for my close-up, it's overheating and it just turned off. Good thing I'm done with the close-up work. Anyway, sorry, I digress. Go out and Google disappearing 4-patch images. That will show you a whole bunch of different ideas and designs and things you can do with your 4-patch using more than just 2 fabrics if you wanted, or go scrappy, because a lot of it also depends on how you put it together. Let's see, I've got this one, I've got this one. Well, I'm not going to be able to show you, since my close-up camera died. Oops. Go Google it, and there's lots of different ways you can put these together. Take care, and thank you so much for watching.